Hello, this is Mr. Stewart. You do have a substitute teacher today, so you thought you were going to be rid of me, but turns out I can find ways to still teach you even though I'm not actually in class with you. And so I want you to watch this video in its entirety and make sure you understand two-step inequalities and especially what happens when we're working with negative variables and how to graph them before you go take the 4.4 quiz. So you should have last night taken the participated in the 4.4 discussion. If you haven't done the 4.4 discussion, you'll want to do that first and then come back to this video. Then watch the video, then take the quiz, then hopefully do super well with that. But anyway, so with equations, we called it two-step equations. I think we've already talked to you guys about this, or multi-step equations because there's multiple inverse operations to take care of. Please recall that with an equation, we always started with the additive inverse stuff first. So we added 3 to both sides. We've addressed what happens when we try to undo the multiplication first. We can do that, but it just makes things more complicated. That goes to 0, and I'm left with 2x is equal to 12. And then I divide both sides by 2, and that means that x is equal to 6. Right? Well, coming over here now, there's not a lot of differences with inequalities and equations, and those differences we've already addressed in chapter 4.3. So as long as you did well with chapter 4.3, you should do fine with this quiz. Now if you think about it, this is going to ask you to solve for the solution set of the inequality, so not just a single answer like we have here, but a set of answers. So again, we just add 3 to both sides, that cancels out. That means that 2x now is greater than 12. Then I divide both sides by 2, and that means that x is greater than 6. Okay, and so if I were to ask you to solve and graph this solution set, we would say 6 compared to x. So x is greater than 6, but not equal to 6. So I'm going to do an open circle, and then I'm going to say that x is anything that's bigger than 6, but not equal to 6. So an open circle and going in this direction. The one thing you'll want to watch out for is when we have negatives with the variables. Here's an example. So this time x is being being divided by a negative 4. Okay. And so, again, we're going to start with the additive inverse stuff first. We're going to add 3 to both sides to isolate the variable. That goes to 0. And I'm left with x divided by a negative 4 is equal to 12. So now to undo division, I'm going to do multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by a negative 4. And that means that goes to 1, and I'm left with x is equal to whatever 12 times 4 happens to be, which is 48, a negative 48. Is that right? 4 times 12? Yes. So that's great. Those are equations. We're good with equations, two-step equations. I think you guys have proven that you understand very well. And so now watch what happens when we do an inequality. Okay, here's the only difference. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, just like I do. And I'm left with x over negative 4 is greater than 12, which is awesome. Now I'm going to undo this division using multiplication, and this time I'm going to multiply both sides by 4, but you got to remember what happens when I multiply two sides of an inequality with a negative number. The direction of the inequality changes. We've talked about why that is. And that's because we need to keep the inequality true, and a negative makes everything around it opposite, including the direction of the solution set. And so now that means that x is actually less than a negative 48. The graph, starting at negative 48, x is the solution set that's any number that is smaller than a negative 48. So it's not equal to negative 48, so I'm just going to do an open circle, and I'm going to move in the left direction. X is anything that's less than a negative 48. So these are the questions that I would like for you to perhaps try to solve yourself. These 4 questions, you might even pause the video, try to solve them, and then come back and see if you got the same answer as me. If you're getting the same answer as me, great. You're welcome to jump to the quiz, take it, and pass it with flying colors. If you're not getting the same one as me, you'll want to probably watch the video tutorial, or I'd go through the 4.4 discussion, or watch this all the way through in its entirety. So go ahead and pause it now. Go ahead and work on these 4 questions, and then unpause it, and then I'll quickly solve them. Okay, so you should have paused the video and worked on each one of these. I'm going to quickly go through this, and hopefully just, I'm not going to do much of an explanation, just kind of see what happens. Undo additive inverse stuff first, subtract 4 from both sides. That means that negative 2x is less than or equal to an 89. And you are welcome to use calculators, but the big deal is to understand what happens when I divide both sides by a negative number. The direction of the inequality changes. This goes to 1, and I'm left with x is greater than or equal to 89 divided by 2, which is going to be 44.5. Okay. If I were to graph this, this is what the graph would look like. X is anything larger than or equal to 44.5. Coming over to the left one here, I want to undo this 1/3 by subtracting 1/3 from both sides. So that goes to 0, and I'm left with, let's see, 3/6 minus 2/6. And so that means that is equal to 1/6. Not a big deal there. So that's 1/6 is less than 2/3 times x. And now it's all about undoing this multiplication right here. So I could either multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 2/3, or I could just divide both sides by 2/3. I'm going to do that. So this comes, and I'll have to write it down here, 1/6 divided by 2/3 is the same thing as 1/6 multiplied by the reciprocal of 2/3, which means that is 3/12. And I can reduce this to 1/4. And so I didn't multiply or divide by a negative this time, so I say 1/4 is less than x. Now, I would probably rewrite this as x is greater than 1/4, just to keep things straight as I decide to graph this. And so I'm going to graph it up here, and 1/4 is any number that's larger than but not equal to, x is anything that's larger but not equal to 1/4. So that's all of those solutions up there. Okay, got to erase all my extra work. And when you take these quizzes, you will definitely want to use scratch paper and show your work as you go through it, and then type your answer in the computer. So here we go. Let's undo this -4 here by adding 4 to both sides. Notice I'm starting on the side with a variable always. Add 4 to both sides, and that leaves me with x divided by 5 is greater than or equal to -14. I'm going to undo this division by multiplying both sides by 5. It's a positive, so there's no need to change the direction of the inequality. X is still going to be larger than or equal to 5 times a negative 14, which should be 50 plus 20, 60, 70, so negative 70. If I were to graph this solution set, then I would put negative 70 here, and I would think, okay, x is anything that's equal to negative 70 or anything that's larger than negative 70. So there's your graph there and your solution set. Last one, easiest of all, undo this positive 1 by subtracting 1 from both sides, so negative x is greater than negative 2. Remember, the direction of the inequality only changes when we multiply or divide by a negative number. This is a negative x here, but we can also think of this as a negative 1 times x. And so to undo multiplication, I divide both sides by a negative 1. That is the reason why I'm changing the direction of the inequality at that point. X is going to be anything less than 2. Negative 2 divided by a negative 1 is equal to a positive 2. So to graph this inequality, I'm going to put 2 here, and x is going to be any solution that is less than 2, but not greater than 2, or not equal to 2. So these are my 4 solutions here. Hopefully, if you can do all 4 of these, then you should do fine on the quiz. Have a good weekend, have a good long break, be safe, and I will see you guys on Monday.